Man, that was a good rest. What time is it? It's already 2? I guess I overslept a bit. What day even is it? Wait, it's Christmas. That can't be right. I just made a Christmas video. And that was after 2 o'clock. Did I manage to time travel or something? Let's see. The current date is Christmas of 2024? Oh god. Has a whole year gone by already? Maybe I just have really bad amnesia or something, right? Let's see. What about the Pokemon Platinum video I've been working on? Oh, I've barely got anything to show for it. Well, what about the other Pokemon idea I had? Oh god damn it, I'm still here? I'll save that for another time. Well, I did have that one idea to make 2 videos about. So how are those going? Oh, it's been a while since I've gotten a new record, I guess. Well, didn't I have some other smaller videos that I wanted to make or something? Where are those? Oh yeah, I forgot that they all ended up there. Wow, I really have nothing to show for this year, huh? I gotta at least make something, so what are my options? It is Christmas, so I could make a video on a Christmas game, but I already did that last year, and it would probably be weird to make 2 Christmas videos in a row, but that's exactly what I'm gonna do. Okay, let's see what I can find. I guess I might as well stick to the DS, so let's search best Christmas DS games. Surely that'll give me some inspiration, right? A Christmas Carol? I had no idea the game even existed, so I guess I can put it on my radar. Martha Stewart? Maybe she'll have some good ideas, and maybe I can even learn how to commit fraud too. Alright, show me some games. Find the Christmas Pickle? I don't think they made that one on the DS. Maybe this isn't the site for me. Ooh, what about this one? This is the video game critic, so surely they must know of some Christmas DS game to play. Game Boy, Switch, Wii, Super Nintendo? Are there any DS games here? Dead Rising 4? Badman? There's gotta be at least one DS game here, right? Oh god, not again. Okay, this clearly is not working. What about Christmas DS games? I have to find something to play now. Let's see. A Christmas Carol, a Christmas Carol, a Christmas Carol. Is this seriously the best I can get? Is this the only other Christmas game on the DS or something? If this game is going to keep showing up, then I guess I'll look a little more into this wiki page. Oh. Wow. Well, what I learned is that this is a game that released in 2009, and that's it. I guess if no one knows anything about this game besides its existence, then I might as well play it. Maybe I can supply someone with enough information to actually write this wiki page instead of it just being this. If I'm being honest, I have virtually no history with A Christmas Carol at all. I've never read the book or watched any of its adaptations, so this is going to be the first time I actually learn the story of Scrooge. All I really know is that he hates Christmas or something, so we're going in completely blind. Hopefully this game won't do a horrible job at telling the story like the last game did. But before I even start playing, what the hell is this? D-Gamer? Apparently this was used in a number of Disney DS games, but given I didn't have many of those, I never would have known. The only game I owned back then that had this was Club Penguin Elite Penguin Force, and that required you to make a D-Gamer account, which doesn't work so well now that Nintendo Wi-Fi connection has been dead for over 10 years. But in the case of A Christmas Carol, it actually does function still. Sure, I can't connect it to an account or anything, but at least it's still functional. You can make an avatar, and you can also unlock stuff from playing games that feature D-Gamer, like outfits and achievements. But enough about a dead service. It's time to see what this game is all about. The title screen is surprisingly full of different things. There's an advent calendar of spot the difference puzzles, which are honestly better than the game I had back in the day. There's cheat codes you can enter, although I have no idea if they're like cheat codes from LEGO games or if they're just useless. I still kinda miss when games had these, even if I rarely ever used them. There's also mini games that you can play, but you have to unlock them in the main game at first. But by far the coolest thing about this game is that you can actually read the original book. And it even comes with a little bookmarking feature to remember where you left off. Honestly, I'm pretty impressed with how much there is to do outside of the actual game. But I think it's finally time to sink my teeth into A Christmas Carol. The story starts off by introducing us to Scrooge and his clerk, Bob Cratchit. Scrooge is a mean old man who only seeks to gain wealth and ruin everyone's fun, where his Clark, is anxiously waiting the arrival of Christmas. He is slowly getting through his work as his fire dims and is constantly checking the clock for the moment he can finally leave. Before mentioning anything else, the quality of the video and animations in this game are surprisingly decent, which is not what I was expecting. Sure, it's Disney, so they always make solid animated films, but that doesn't necessarily translate to such a small screen, and it doesn't solely apply to just the video clips. The animation in the actual game is fairly high quality too, which makes the gameplay itself feel a lot smoother. There's also narration during the video clips, which wasn't super common on the DS in general, and especially isn't common for shovelware games. The final thing I wanted to mention is that the art style is honestly a pretty interesting one. It has the typical cartoony look to it that most Disney animated films have, but the thing that really interested me was how it also manages to look uncanny at the same time. This becomes increasingly prevalent as the game goes on, and while it probably would scare a few kids, I think it does play into the themes of the story pretty well. With all that out of the way, we finally get to the gameplay, and it's not really what I was expecting. I was expecting a basic platformer or something, but this is a point-and-click adventure game. I feel like we all have a bit of nostalgia for these, seeing as they're meant to be basic and easy for kids to pick up. All you really have to do is just tap on stuff in these types of games, but this game also makes use of more advanced touch controls too. Dragging and shaking are used throughout the game, which are a lot more immersive than simply tapping things. They even made use of these mechanics in the spot the difference puzzles by making you circle the difference instead of just tapping it. I think these controls make a big impact on the game, even if they seem like they're not anything special. However, there's one other way to control the game that might be a little more controversial than anything else, and that's microphone controls. By blowing into the microphone, you can reveal all the things on screen which you can interact with. This is a pretty important feature for a game that's meant to be for everyone, and it makes the decision to lock this behind the microphone a little concerning. I played LEGO Indiana Jones on the DS earlier this year, and that game also prominently featured microphone controls. You would need to blow into the microphone to activate fans, blow out torches, or inflate a raft, and I would often find myself running out of breath when trying to fully explore certain levels. It also didn't help that I would frequently blow and be met with nothing. which meant I had to blow a lot more than if it would have just worked the first time. I expected this to be similarly problematic, but it actually isn't that bad. The only option in the options menu is for changing the microphone sensitivity, which helps alleviate some of the issues I had with the game like LEGO Indiana Jones. And while I think that having an option for a button press would also be nice, I think that having hints tied to the microphone is kind of a smart idea. If there was a button to do that, it would probably have to be displayed on the screen so the player knows. But since you have to blow into the microphone, there really doesn't need to be a UI. Maybe you could argue this is laziness, but I think the lack of UI really lets the quality animation shine. It makes it feel less like you're playing a game and more like you're interacting with the story instead. As for the gameplay itself, it doesn't really do anything groundbreaking, but it honestly is not bad. The puzzles in this game are not mind-numbingly simple, and there were a few moments where I really had to think about how to achieve what I was trying to achieve. If the player does get stuck, there are occasional hints that will nudge you in the right direction, which I think is kind of necessary when you know there's going to be kids playing your game. And on top of the main puzzles, there are a lot of extra hidden things in each stage as well. There's a bunch of hidden items that reward you for exploring and experimenting, and I didn't even come close to finding all of these throughout the game despite trying to. There's also a ghost that will pop up in each level and you have to capture it by circling it. I don't really know why we're capturing ghosts like Luigi, but this is part of what I mean when I'm talking about the uncanniness of this game. Usually when ghosts are present in media meant for kids, they're portrayed in a more positive light. But most of the ghosts in this game are honestly unnerving. They don't scare me now, but if I was a kid, I can't help but feel like I would be a little creeped out. I know this is coming from the guy who used to be scared of the Mewtwo sign in the cave in Pokemon Snap, but even I can't deny that they're not the stereotypical friendly or jolly ghost. The final part of the gameplay is the minigames that I mentioned earlier, and while they aren't on the level of something like Clubhouse games, I was a little intrigued when I first saw this game feature them. I honestly thought this might even be a game that's just a bunch of basic and uninteresting minigames with a potential Christmas Carol skin, but they're at least tied to the gameplay and story of A Christmas Carol. They don't have a ton of depth, but I could definitely see a kid playing some of these during a car ride or something, and there's even a pass the DS option in the minigame menu. So they could actually provide some value to the player at some point. The coin tossing minigame is not the best, but I've played worse, so I can't really complain that much. After getting Bob some coal and a coin to pass the time with, Scrooge berates people collecting donations and Bob gets to leave. With the day over, Scrooge heads into town and it's our job to make his journey home a complete misery. That feels a little unnecessarily brutal, honestly, even if this guy is an asshole, but I'm down with it. There's a few stages like this, and they're probably the weakest part of the game in my opinion. They're really just auto-scrollers where you have to tap on things as Scrooge walks by until he gets fed up with everything and leaves. It's boring, slow, and feels repetitive. But at least these stages do have collectibles, and they aren't almost the exact same thing every time. Upon arriving home, Scrooge is greeted with a somewhat unsettling ghostly face that looks like his friend Jacob Marley, who has been long dead. He continues to see more ghosts as he makes his way inside, and after sitting down by the fire, we can do a short slide puzzle to make Jacob Marley's ghost appear. He tries to warn Scrooge, but Scrooge decides to sleep it off, so now we have to wake him up. This portion was a bit annoying for me, given that the game kept telling me to pull the blanket off of him, but that never seemed to do anything. I spent a while trying to do this or find some other thing I do, but all I really had to do was ring the bell. It does make sense, but why the hell is it repeatedly telling me to pull the blanket off him if it wasn't working? With Scrooge now awake, Jacob Marley tells him that he needs to learn from the 3 ghosts that will soon visit him, or he'll end up meeting the same fate of walking the earth with chains around his neck. That description is something that caught me off guard a bit, and after seeing a few moments like this already, it made me appreciate the story a bit more. Sure, maybe it's just a way to scare kids into being happy because otherwise the evil ghosts are going to get them. But I see it more as a story that doesn't care to pull punches to remain family friendly. I always like when a story just tries to be itself and doesn't care to conform to what's safe or simple. This could just be Disney simply not wanting to alter the source material too much, but I get the feeling that the story was intentionally made to be a bit spookier than the average children's Christmas story to set itself apart from the rest. Speaking of which, here's the Ghost of Christmas Past. This thing is easily the most uncanny thing to exist in this game. It kind of reminds me of the sun in Teletubbies, which never bothered me as a kid, but looking at that thing now, it's just ominous. There's something about taking a baby's face and just turning it into this yellow burning husk that just makes it infinitely more creepy. And while there is at least a resemblance to the baby in Teletubbies, this thing just looks like it's staring into my soul. Anyways, it takes Scrooge to the past, where he has to help his younger self build a snowman. This is fairly self-explanatory apart from obtaining the branches, which I had to shake the tree to get. I didn't really think to do this until the game told me so, and maybe that could be considered a little hand-holdy, but I think it's fine for a game like this. Also, there's ducks in the stage, which automatically makes this 10 times better than the Grinch game. Once we build the snowman, we get to assault some kids with snowballs, which just feels kind of wrong. The speed that they move and the way that they move really just makes them look more like aliens posing as kids. So hopefully they won't send the drones after me for assaulting their kind. Once we're done with that, the Ghost of Christmas Past takes Scrooge to a Christmas party 20 years later, where he intends to win a prize to impress Belle. There are 2 minigames here, both of which are just matching minigames. But the first one I played was this weird mix between matching and scratch-offs. It's really not much more different from the regular matching minigame, but I honestly found it to be interesting enough to be invested in. Once we've won, Scrooge needs the fiddler to play a tune, which is not the easiest thing to control. It's a pretty basic rhythm minigame, but to hold a note, you have to be swiping left and right, which just feels strange to do. I still golded it anyway, but it wasn't really something I wanted to play again. The final part of the stage requires us to get the mistletoe so Scrooge can kiss Belle, and this was the second hardest part of the game for me. They really don't give you much of an indication on what you're supposed to do, so I just kept making this guy kiss his wife and feeding the dog. After trying everything, including playing all of the minigames again, I found out that all you had to do was give the wife dessert so she asked for a fruit punch, which makes this guy put down the mistletoe. With that, I was finally able to progress, and my reward for all of that was finding out that Scrooge just ended up leaving her a year later. Really? You left her for money, I guess? After that, we're finally free of the Ghost of Christmas Past, which I was extremely glad about because this thing still kind of freaks me out every time it pops up. Soon after Scrooge is brought back to his room, another ghost shows up. But before it can get in, Scrooge locks the door and braces the chair against it. I really don't get how this even works, since a ghost should just be able to go through it, but sure. To unlock the door, we first have to get Scrooge to move, which took me a bit to actually figure out. I even tried this difficult slide puzzle, but it ended up doing nothing. Instead, all you had to do was tap the spider above his bed to get him to move, and once he sits down, you have to do things in a specific order. First, you have to tap the mouse to distract him, then knock the chair over while he can't prop it back up, and finally unlock the door to let the ghost in. That whole process is honestly a lot more complicated than I would have expected from this game. But it's not like it's completely illogical, so I can't really be mad at the game for it. The ghost of Christmas Present greets Scrooge, and after everything I've seen so far, this guy is the most normal looking ghost I've seen. He takes Scrooge into the streets to show him how others can make the most of Christmas. This is similar to the early stage where the screen slowly scrolls as they float by. You can interact with most of the same things, but this time you have to drag from his torch instead of tapping. It's repetitive and not super fun, but it could be worse. Once we've done enough, he takes Scrooge to the house of his clerk, Bob Cratchit. We get to see his family and the joy on their faces as they celebrate Christmas. And then we get to cook. Literally. This is basically just budget cooking mama, and though the controls make this a little more challenging than it probably needed to be, I really didn't mind. It's different from most of the other minigames we've played at this point, and the time frame is honestly somewhat tight compared to what I expected. After we finish cooking for the first time, we unlock the ability to play Snap, which is basically the Dark Souls boss of minigames. This was by far the hardest part of the game for me, and that mainly came down to the insane reaction time from the AI. When looking back at the footage, I counted a whopping 7 frames before it reacted to there being a pair, which gives the player roughly 0.23 seconds to react if my math is right, which it might not be. However, it's even worse when you're the one who places the match on top, since you have to quickly get to the snap button after placing it. Here, you have about 20 frames to react, which is roughly 2/3 of a second. Sure, that's a little more generous, but for a kids game, I expected it to be more lenient than that. After about 12 minutes of struggling in Snap, I was finally able to win, and I stopped there to finish cooking. After cooking a few more times, the ghost brings Scrooge to another house. Now we're in the house of Scrooge's nephew Fred, who previously invited Scrooge to his Christmas party. Just like the Christmas party before, we have to win at some minigames. But this time, we have to win so that Topper can lose and will talk to the girl he has feelings for. We can play matching again, which is kind of boring, or we can play Snap again, which is not happening. That leaves us with only the new minigame, Dominoes. I've come to appreciate Dominoes a lot more after playing Clubhouse games, since I never truly understood the rules and scoring system until playing that. But compared to that, this version of Dominoes isn't great. There isn't really any scoring, and it's simply about getting rid of all your dominoes first. But my biggest issue was the lack of polish. It doesn't feel snappy like Clubhouse games, since you have to hold the domino there for a bit before it actually lets you place it. And I also had an instance where I tried to place what I assume is a legal domino, and it just wouldn't let me. Maybe you can't place a blank on a double blank, but given how the inverse works, I don't see why I can't. Once we get Topper to lose, we have to play a piano minigame, which is even worse than the fiddle minigame. It's incredibly hard to tap the bottom of the screen accurately while looking at the top screen for upcoming notes, which just caused me to miss a ton of notes. But it's not like you need a gold to advance, so it didn't really matter how badly I messed up. After playing the piano, the ghost announces that his time on this earth has come to an end, and Scrooge is left in the street as the ghost of Christmas yet to come approaches him. Unlike the previous two, this ghost is far more menacing, and just silently approaches Scrooge with its bony arm pointing straight at him. It may be a little scary for a story that is seemingly aimed at kids, but I like its design a lot. Maybe I'm biased because I just think the Grim Reaper is cool, but it's fitting for the Overseer of Death itself. As it moves towards Scrooge, he sees the black hearse that took Marley away and flees down the street. This is where the gameplay takes a bit of a turn, and I honestly like this change. The gameplay had been getting somewhat stale, and with the story suddenly turning a bit more chaotic, having the gameplay also become more chaotic is incredibly fitting. Scrooge is now running down the street as the hearse slowly chases him, and it's our job to throw things at it to keep it away from him. As he continues to run, he starts shrinking, and eventually escapes through a tiny hole. This brings us to a shop, where Scrooge has to climb a table to hear a conversation. This gameplay is once again nothing groundbreaking, but it kind of gives me Ghost Trick vibes. Once he makes it to the top, he finds out that someone died, and their belongings were being sold here. It's not too difficult to start putting the pieces together, especially when Scrooge feels there's something familiar about it all. But before he gets a chance to think further, he's knocked off the table with a bunch of rats. This puts Scrooge in a dark maze, and it's our job to guide him through before time runs out and without running into the rats. Both the rats and Scrooge are attracted to the light, which makes for a better stealth puzzle than I originally thought. And I had this incredibly close chase at the end, which honestly was kind of thrilling. Once Scrooge has escaped the dark maze, he's returned back to regular size, and he's now inside a cemetery. The ghost is there too, and it menacingly points to one specific gravestone. After clearing it off, Scrooge realizes the truth, and that he would die alone if he continued down the same path. Also, I forgot to add this in the script, but why does the gravestone have just his face on it? I feel like that makes it 20 times weirder than if it just said his name. Anyways, he slumps upon this realization and soon wakes up in his bed, overjoyed that he's alive. He heads into the streets to make this the best Christmas he's ever had. And right before we get back to the gameplay, we get a rad mask. Hell yeah, my avatar is going to impress everyone now. Scrooge walks through the street again, which has gotten kind of stale by this point, but at least it is a little different because he's spreading cheer now. He even gets this parade of people behind him as he continues to walk through the street until he finally reaches his destination. Once he arrives at Bob Cratchit's house, he intends to give them the best Christmas they've ever had. To do this, we have to break into their house. Probably not the best thing to see on Christmas morning, but sure, I guess. After we prop up the tree, we have to drag things to their fairly self-explanatory spots, with the only obstacle being a dog, which we just have to feed sausages every once in a while. After he finishes decorating and sees the joy on their faces, he heads to Fred's party and gives everyone a present. I don't really understand why he chose to hide his presents throughout the room, and I also don't know how he had time to do any of that, but whatever. Since this is the last stage, this is also the place where you can finally use all of those hidden decorations you collected throughout the game. And yeah, it looks pretty bare. I thought I was doing alright throughout my playthrough, but apparently I missed a lot. The game ends with Scrooge finally becoming a changed man. Gone are the days of bah humbug and obsessing over money, and now he's completely transformed into a happy, inspirational figure. He even becomes a second father figure to one of Bob Cratchit's kids, Tiny Tim. And that's where the game basically ends. Honestly, I expected to play this game and end up with an opinion that amounted to nothing. I have no real attachment to the story or anything Disney related really, but this was a lot better than I thought it would be. Hell, they didn't even slap me with an unskippable credit sequence after beating it, let alone slapping me with one 3 times. You don't even have to view the credits, and you can skip them too, but I didn't mind sitting through them all the way, given that this game actually respected me. My expectations were incredibly low, and I didn't expect this to stand out at all. But despite not knowing or caring for the story beforehand, I found it to be a pretty solid and refreshing take on a Christmas story. And this game did a fairly solid job at telling that story. It didn't feel like I was reading words off of a screen, it felt like I was actually experiencing a story, which is what I think a simplistic game like this should strive to do more than anything. The gameplay wasn't a major standout, but it was still what I'd consider above average for a game like this. And that's enough to make it stand out from the typical shovelware garbage that plagues the DS. It even has extra things to do and some amount of replayability, all while costing less than the Grinch game did. There's even minigames to kill a bit of time, and D-Gamer was also a funny thing to mess around with despite not being fully functional anymore. I expected this game to end up turning me into Scrooge by the end of it, bah humbug and all. But the irony is that it did actually do that, just not in the way I thought it would. This game didn't make me feel like the Scrooge at the start, but rather the Scrooge at the end. The Scrooge that can see the value of Christmas, just like how I can actually see the value in this game. It wasn't perfect, but as a way to experience the story, I can't say it was a terrible experience. Maybe you'll still be better off watching an adaptation or reading the novel, but hey, you can read the novel in this game too. Even if it isn't a perfect experience, I think it's something I can honestly kind of recommend. Given that there's at least something here, games like this remind me that while games might not be remembered very fondly or not remembered for being notable, there is some value here. And that's something that's fun for me to discover. Most games aren't going to be major standouts like our favorites are, but that doesn't mean they don't have something to provide you. And that's really all I have to say about A Christmas Carol. I think I can say with some degree of confidence that the next video won't be a Christmas video, and you won't have to wait a whole year for it. Although I doubt anyone is waiting for these videos anyway. 2024 wasn't a perfect year for me, and it didn't help that I spent a lot of time being addicted to crack, even more crack, and a bit of extra crap while scrapping pretty much everything I had planned. For the future, I think I'm going to focus on making more videos like these rather than trying to make huge projects and trying to make them as perfect as I can. Until then, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and a Happy New Year to you. Let's make 2025 a good year. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.